matter if we call it HCI or UX. I've been around in this game for like 42 years, which is significantly older than almost everyone in the audience. And I think it probably does matter. I think because the names that we call things, I think, reflect different focuses, different methods used, and often different outcomes. I put needed and wanted because we all know needs and wants are always identical. I'd say 42 years in the business, and I've been called lots of things. But more to the point, what I do has been called lots of things. And I've never been that precious about it. Frankly, if somebody's been willing to pay for me to do something that I can do, and it's either interesting or lucrative or preferably both, and then I've done that. And I've called it whatever they needed to put on the invoice so they would pay it. But I started, before I became a consultant, I started as an academic at Loughborough. I was a founding member of the research group in the Department of Ergonomics and Cybernetics, which was believed in 1970 with the late Brian Shackle, who miraculously persuaded the university to give him seed funding to set up from scratch a research group of 10 people. And he recruited 10 people, none of whom had ever been to Loughborough before, who had backgrounds in engineering, computer science, psychology, ergonomics, industrial design. And that group was an incredible place to be. It's never been like that since. It grew, it's now disappeared into other things. But even after it started, it was never the same again, because as it grew, it attracted like-minded people. What was nice at the beginning was there were no like-minded people. We were a unique group. And we did all sorts of projects for research funds, councils, for companies of various sorts. The first project I want to share with you it was called Man-Computer Interaction in Commercial Applications. If you're following the Star Wars, you'll know that it used to be called Man-Computer Interaction. It was published in 1970. That's what the report looked like. It was typed onto funny paper and duplicated, and there's somewhat less than sexy graphics on the title. Reported a survey of man-computer interaction in commercial applications. It was led by Ken Easton, now Emeritus Professor Ken Easton, Lila de Modron, now Professor Lila de Modron, and Tom Stewart, now Tom Stewart. I guess I have to live with the big house, the flash car, and the office. We were in a research group called Human Sciences and Advanced Technology. One of the first jobs we had was to decide what our own name was. And there's no truth in the rumour that we called ourselves HCI, so you can answer the phone and say, who's that? There's even less truth in the rumour that we thought about calling ourselves the Centre for Understanding New Technology. The focus of this study was how, at that time it was very popular to call people naive users, use computers at work. Totally insulting term, because naive, a typical patronising computer industry. You know, remote users are the people who have a terminal on their desk, that sort of thing. How naive users use computers at work. And we did 327 semi-structured interviews and observations in, I think it was 27 different organisations. And one of the things that was interesting in those days, in Loughborough, there were probably 3 computers. There was a big one in the university, there was a big one at Brush Electrical, the railway agent, and there was a big one at Pfizer's Pharmaceutical. I actually have more computers in my bag than that now, how the world has changed. We found these 27 systems, sorry, I'll come back. And the outcome of our research was, well, this report pointed out that there was a different experience for the 3 types of users that we encountered. There were managers, who very often used computers indirectly with other people getting data for them. There were clerks who basically changed the desk, software away at terminals. And there were specialists who might be engineers, or planners, or economists, who were modelling things with computers. And the overwhelming finding was that they all needed more powerful interfaces. That they were all frustrated by the limits of their current interfaces. But equally, they couldn't actually use their current interfaces that well. The industry had a very long way to go before computers became the kind of ubiquitous and powerful tool that they are now. But they all could see the potential. There was nobody there who said, I wish computers hadn't been invented. They were just frustrated making it work. Just another anecdote. I remember a manager who had was interrogating a database and got frustrated every time he asked for a report. He got a few pages that missed the point. So he eventually said to me, for goodness sake, just do the total report. Don't do all the search, all the narrowing down. Just do the total report. And I happened to be in his office when this guy turned up with a sack truck with that much printout. So that's why people needed to develop better interface. Another project I was involved with there was in what you might call computer ergonomics. Tended to have a hardware focus. It was sponsored by the Newspaper Industry Research Association in Kaffieh, based in Darmstadt, and it was led by Ahmed Shakir from Berlin, still a good friend of mine, David Harper-Weaver, and myself. And it was into what the newspaper industry called VDTs. As somebody said to me, it's the two things a journalist fears most. I expect the ripple flap to hit a bit on it. But the focus was how to avoid the negative impact of the terms of newspapers. Remember, this was in the 70s. Our methods, we surveyed early adopters, mainly in Europe, and literature reviews and fed-in research, a lot of it done by Ahmed in Germany. The outcome was this, the VDT manual, a practical handbook manual for newspapers to aid implementation. It wasn't just hardware, actually, though it did include, I don't know if you can actually read it here, but on the front cover it talks about task organization. There was already a recognition that you could have the best keyboard in the world, the best screen in the world, the best desk in the world, the best environment in the world, the best chair in the world, and a crap job. It wouldn't work. So task organization even then was being recognized as important. It's a very successful project report, most successful project report I've ever been involved in. It was republished as a text, I think it's still called the VDT Manual, by John Wiley, and also in German by Australia. I then got headhunted out of USAT into the commercial world, and I joined Butler Cox and Partners, who are management consultants specializing in IT. So I call myself a management consultant specializing in the human aspects of IT. Our focus was in two areas. Video, I think they have the video text? No. Video text was the kind of earliest attempt to bring digital communication, digital technology into the home. It used teletext technology and allowed people to access terminals using dial-up telephone lines and bumpy keyboards and so on. It was the precursor of things like email and actually like the internet itself. It was run by what was then the post office and so on. But the human factors were getting more interesting, and also how to make systems user-friendly. And I now cringe at the fact that I did actually use that term then, because what we tried to do was do desk research into the topics and produce punchy presentations with external experts to try and engage with senior management. And senior management are like children, they like things short and snappy and preferably fun. So I did use the term user-friendly, and I used to show examples of things that weren't friendly that computers would do. And I remember on a big dial-up system to the States once, I was sitting there doing stuff, trying to work out what was happening, and teletype came back, you have been idle too long. How does something can be, I've been idle, I've been trying to work out what's going on. But that was the kind of mindset there was in those days. Talking about external experts, hopefully you've heard of Nick Negroponte from MIT. I get some nods in that. He shared my bed once. I should point out I wasn't in it at the time. But we'd flown him into we did a roadshow of talks around Europe about all sorts of management topics, including making systems user-friendly, and he flew in to give us his usual sales pitch about the machine architectural lab. And after giving his presentation, instead of staying to listen to mine as a normal sort of friendly person might do, he said, "Can I borrow your room key so I can put my head down?" So that was the closest I got. The outcome, well, I think I managed in that limited environment to put human issues on the business IT agenda. But our clients were big companies who were beginning to realize that their systems weren't necessarily working as well as they should because they'd forgotten some aspect of the people. There was still a mindset that said it's because the people are too stupid, but there was a recognition that there kind of was an issue. And then for me, the best outcome was I left to join some colleagues at System Concept. I wasn't technically the original founder of System Concept, but they did leave, not shortly afterwards, but they did leave. But I was one of the early people of System Concepts, and the shorthand now is calling me founder. So System Concepts, a lot of what we did was called human factors in IT then, and I don't know if you know this, but in the UK, ergonomics was the old one. This is the Ergonomic Society, starting from the Ergonomic Research Society, is 60-odd years old. Now the Sharpen Institute for Ergonomics and Human Factors. Much harder to say. But ergonomics was seen as sort of boring. It was chairs, it was desks, and that sort of stuff. When people started to do more interesting things with software and technology, they called it human factors. The curious thing is, in the States, it was the other way around. Human factors was the name given to what they called knobs and dials and cockpits. And when people started to do more interesting things, they called it ergonomics. And the situation was made even more confusing when the two professional bodies decided to put an "and" in the name. So the American Society became Human Factors and Ergonomics Society, and in the UK it became the Ergonomics and Human Factors. To me, they're actually both the same thing. It depends what you like. But in this particular project, I'm going to talk about it was BT. They were setting up a huge system, customer service center system, built by Logica. We worked with an internal team who called themselves Human Factors, so what we did was Human Factors. The focus was on creating an optimum flow for different tasks. The concept behind customer service system was that it would be a single point of contact for a customer. So the system would allow any person at a terminal to answer any query from a customer and deal with it end to end in a positive and engaging manner. So you would phone up to complain about your handset being broken, and before you got off the phone, they'd have sold you an extra line. The technology was quite clever. One of the slight weaknesses was that in BT there were a very large number of people whose attitude was, oh my god, it's a customer line, how do I get rid of them? But nonetheless, the system was massive, and the work was very interesting. The other thing was it was one of the first uses of colour in computer displays. Computer displays used to be all fuzzy green, and starting to use colour, there were concerns about colour blindness, how you would use colour, could you use colour on its own, etc. So what we did was we did task analysis, walkthrough, mock-ups, simulations. And the thing that sticks out in my mind was we actually used video recording to record some of the walkthroughs. Interestingly enough, the camera, which was a basic domestic model, was about the size of that professional camera over there now. And the recorder came in another suitcase. So basically, what you can now do with your phone turned into two suitcases. But nonetheless, using video to be able to show results to people was fantastic. So the outcome were model dialogue designs and guidance and effective use of colour. And as I say, we did this with an internal team and then went on to run with it. There were issues with the system, but they were technology issues, not necessarily user interface. Human-computer interaction / interface. I once sat in a BCS committee about HCI, and it spent the first 2 meetings discussing whether it was human-computer interaction or human-computer interface. And not only that, but which was the more general term and which was the more specific term. And actually both are terms. The system project I want to talk about here, 2000, was for EDS, the big American software company. The system was called Accord. It's the Child Support Agency up in Newcastle. Not necessarily an area where there's been fantastic success in IT systems. Our focus was trying to create a consistent user experience. It was a forms-based system. Might look a bit cumbersome to you, but if you're a civil servant in Child Support Agency, a form is a very familiar tool. And having an electronic form means you don't have to rub things out and you can pass them through, etc. So that was okay. Our methods were to work with them to develop what was called the HCI interface, human-computer interface style guide, and then use that to do ongoing design reviews and to do user testing at key points. I should at this point give credit to Leslie Fountain at the back there, who's no longer a system concept, but she learned a lot of what she was doing from there. She led the project there for part of the time. A couple of issues here that were quite sort of interesting in hindsight. One was they were using a very structured design process with lots of design documents that had to be signed off. And signing those off involved comparing them against the style guide and testing bits out with users. The problem with the system, the process was that by the time we found an issue with the design, there were already 2 stages down the line, and the next version had already been built. So it was fed back to later versions. Of course, when we got near the end, a lot of our findings were too late to influence the final design. But in the words of Scotty, I think it is, it's worse than that. He's dead, Jim. We've got any tracking fans. Not only were we too late with some of our findings, but some of our findings actually showed up flaws in the specification. But when we reported them back, the answer was, I'm sorry, it's built to the specification. That specification has been signed off by the minister, and therefore there's no way we can change it. So that was quite frustrating. And that was HCI, interface interaction. Okay, one of the last projects I did before I retired a few years ago was BP, which overall title Human-Centered Design. One of the things that we found over the years is that you can often put yourself in the place of the user. It's a classic thing we do doing expert reviews or walkthroughs or whatever. And sometimes they're naive users, sometimes it's aimed at the general public website. So, BBC iPlayer, you can put yourself in that place very easily. Sometimes the job's a little bit more complex, but by doing some analysis, you can still do walkthroughs and understand what they're doing. This project was for BP subsurface and wells, and was for systems for people who were so specialist in geophysics and geotechnics and seismic analysis. I could barely understand the job titles, let alone what they were doing. But the problem they had at BP was that some of these experts had been around for a long time and actually didn't like some of the newer systems. They preferred to write command language type codes to do analyses, because it was much more efficient, which it was, but only if you knew it. And of course the newer generation coming in, A, didn't have that background, and B, wanted to use more graphical and sophisticated interfaces. And the old guys were saying, well, that doesn't work, because why do click, 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 when I can just type in hashtag string, blah, 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 and it works. And of course they were right, but it wasn't a sustainable model. So part of what we did was use a tool. You're not expected to see that, read that by the way. It's just several principles with colored lines. But the idea was to use a tool based on ISO 92411 dialogue design, and they're sort of interface principles. And each principle's got a number of checkpoints. So for example, fits with the user task, because it's 7 or 8 checkpoints. One of the checkpoints is the sequence of tasks right for the user, it's sort of optimal. And that allowed us to find an issue here, which I would never have been able to discover before. I still don't actually know what the guy was doing, but he was basically analysing the yield in an oil well in Houston. And this wizard took him through selecting various data streams and various seismic analyses and other things that you could calculate. And then when you got to the end, you selected which well you wanted to do it on, press run. And the problem was that when you press run, it would come back and say, sorry, I haven't got all that data. So it was a very simple bug. If at the beginning it said which well are you interested in, it would only have shown you wells that they had the data for. But I would never have even understood what the problem was if we hadn't had that tool to draw it out. But what was nice about it was that slide was able to be shown to the software vendor and say, that is a problem. And they could then decide how much it was going to cost to fix. You could then argue about how important it was, whether it needed fixing, but it gave you a very specific usability bug that could be clearly communicated to the people responsible. As a tool to aid procurement, you could use some of the graphical images to give you different impressions of how good different things were. And we also worked with BP to try and build in some what they call best practice guidelines to incorporate human-centered design in their development process. As many of you know, I have a couple of hobbies over the years. And if you know me well, you know that like me, they're slightly strange. Behavior and information technology, have anybody heard of that? Anybody published it even? Anyway, it's been going since 1981, which then probably before many of you were born. And I also chair the ISO PC 159SC4, Human System Interaction Standard Committee, responsible for things like ISO 924. Do you have an ISO 924? Few more words. The focus of both those activities is to improve the experience of people using digital technology. Consultancy is short, sharp shots. Publishing and standards are long, slow burns. There are many organizations where having a standard on something really matters, they will pay attention to it, whereas if you haven't got a standard, you're going to say, oh, that's fine, we'll move on. The methods, publishing useful research, hopefully. I contemplated putting question marks around the useful, and then I thought, well, if I have got any authors in the audience, there'll be so few I don't want to offend them. So, but the aim has always been to publish useful research and to develop consensus-based international standards. My latest, I think one of the outcomes is widely used standards, particularly human-centered designs, first found in 1347 of 1999. Last week or week before, 1st of September, week before, we had a formal launch of this standard, the Human-Centered Organization, ISO 27500. And basically that standard says, we know a lot about human-centered design to make systems better for people. Can we apply some of those same principles to the whole organisation? And we think we can, and that standard is published, and we're trying hard to promote it. So, I was asked to talk about the future. Who knows? I'm the person who was shown Space Wars, a video game with little dots in 1972. That's never going to get anywhere, I said. We visited the National Physical Laboratory where people were playing with packet switching and ARPANET and sending each other messages down the corridor. That's not going to go anywhere. So what do I know about predicting the future? I do know designing technology for people is too important to leave to experts, which is why even though we keep rebranding ourselves from ergonomics or human factors or usability or user interface to user experience or customer experience, or we can take over the world, the populations get bigger because more and more people want in on the act. And if you're there as a kind of expert, although the industry is expanding and very dramatic, your job may not. Terms like user-friendly and even UX can be patronizing and misleading. User-friendly, I can imagine a project manager going to a customer saying, we'd like to have made it more friendly. We'd like to have made the user experience better, but we thought you'd rather have it on time, so we're delivered. And people would say, yeah, we'll go with that, we'll do a bit more training, we'll put up with it being unfriendly. I'm not care about their experience. If instead they said, the system doesn't work, but we thought you'd rather have it on time, that is then revealed for the nonsense that it is. UX and what we're calling user-friendly are mainstream. They are not fringe benefits. They are actually what makes technology work. And also, in an industry, we need to add value to problem solvers, not the operation was successful but the patient died type of expert. One of the issues we had in system concepts when we recruited in sort of new graduates who were technically very competent, there would always be glee expressed in their reports at the bugs they found in a client's product. Great, we've really found all these lovely ways. Hang on a minute. The tone should be, I'm very sorry, we found these bugs. Here's what you do about it. But this sort of patronising, we're the experts and you can get on with it, isn't going to get us jobs in the future. Now, I did say I was past president of the Ergonomics Society, and actually the last president of the Ergonomics Society, so I had to have chairs in here somewhere. Which chair is the most ergonomic? No questions. No great thinking, show of hands. The one on the left. The one in the middle. The one on the right. Okay, the point is it's a trick question because I didn't tell you what the context of use was. And you probably, the ones who didn't put their hand up, I'll assume that was why, rather than you can't put your hand up. If I'd said the context was to sit and relax and watch television, it would have been the one on the left. If I said it was to work at the desk, depending on your budget, it might be the one in the middle. And if I said it was to drive a train, it might be on the one at the right. So they're all in their own way potentially ergonomic. It depends on the context of use, which is why context is king. Why I like user experience as a name from what we're interested in. We define it in the human-centered design standard as persons' perceptions and responses resulting from the use and or anticipated use of a product, system, or service. International standards are international consensus based on voting from 25 different countries. So to get a definition of greed, sometimes it has to be, anodyne is not the right word, but it can't always be exactly what you want. It's a political statement. So in fact, there are 3 notes to the definition, which I'm not expecting you to read here. If you ever look it up, read them. The first note says basically user experience is everything. It's the whole caboodle. Note 2 says it's not, it depends very heavily on the context of use. And note 3 says it's not completely different from usability. Usability is part. Good usability helps to create a good user experience. They're not identical, but they're not different. And I find myself, honestly, this is not a link, by the way. I did consider the idea of having a link to the YouTube, and then I thought, God knows what firewalls and everything else will do. So Google Don Norman UX, and you will find this minute and a half, where Don Norman explains when they invented the term UX in 93 to 97 at Apple, which may or may not be true, Don's never been known for being honest. It doesn't just mean fancy website, it does mean the whole caboodle. And never been known for being unduly modest, but I think in this case he's absolutely right. So I think that's probably me. Time we've got right. Time for some questions. Okay.